Chodesh Tov, and thank you all for joining us today. Since this event is being videotaped, it is essential that you turn off your electronics. Thanks so much. Planning this lecture is a big job, and without Rebecca Jalali, who is also my invaluable source of information regarding Bollywood, the Hollywood film industry, with which I'm mildly obsessed with, we would be unable to present this series. During Ariel's long illness, there was one man who always sat by Ariel's side, a man who could always be counted on for spiritual support and common sense advice. Rabbi Elazar Muskin is not just a friend to the Avrech family, but a pillar of our lives here in Los Angeles. Ariel was proud to call Rabbi Muskin his Rebbe. Karen and I constantly struggle with recapturing the essence of Ariel. In defense against the pain, many details are hazy, or so sharp they are effervescent, igniting our hearts for only a bearable instant. We have found that the best way to remember our son is to quote his words and retell stories that reveal his unique character. One of these moments occurred at his 12th birthday party, a trip with all his friends to Amadeli, a stop at the comic book store, winding up with a screening of a favorite video of our home. At the end, we interviewed the boys for the video. At first, in his typical manner, Ariel hesitated, said very little. Then, after all his friends spoke and he had gathered his thoughts, he said, "I'm glad that my friends are here now, and I hope that we will still be friends in 25 years. Friendship is eternal. Friendship is a wonderful thing. I could write a whole book about how great it is." Ariel loved being with his friends, and so a gathering like this, for you are all his friends, is exquisitely attuned to his soul. We are so pleased that many of Ariel's friends are here today. One dear friend, Rabbi Avi Stewart, sat learning Torah with Ariel for hours, even when Ariel could no longer speak. He soothed him with song, and today we call on Rabbi Avi Stewart to introduce the morning's events with the Devar Torah. This morning's program will proceed as follows. After Rabbi Stewart, David Horowitz will deliver the Ariel Avrech Yahrzeit lecture, followed by a brief question and answer period. Because it is Rosh Chodesh, we will not say the Kel Maleh. Instead, Rabbi Muskin will lead us in a kapitel Tehillim, after which I will recite the Kaddish, and then you are all invited to a brunch in the social hall. I am honored to turn the podium over to Rabbi Avi Stewart.
Thank you very much. Shavua Tov and Chodesh Tov, and thank you for inviting me. Ariel and I met in the 9th grade. I guess I wasn't invited to that birthday party. And truth to be told, and sad to say, most of his adult life was very challenging. He took ill initially, if I'm not mistaken, in 9th grade, and then again in 11th grade. And the rest of his life was really spent trying to recover from the treatment that had kept him alive. I left Yeshiva Gedola here for the 12th grade. I went to Ner Yisrael in Baltimore, Ner Yisrael Rabbinical College, and he joined me a year later in 1998. We spent 2 years as roommates, as chavrusas, as confidants. And I loved Ariel like a brother, and in a sense we were closer than brothers. I can't believe that it's been 10 years since his Petira. It seems like only yesterday that Rabbi Singer was standing right here, saying Eicha, crying Eicha over and over again. So what are we doing here today? From a Jewish perspective, the yahrzeit of a person's death is a time in which we can access and connect to the soul of the departed in a more significant way than any other time. It's a time in which the soul, being unable to propel itself upon the journey, its journey, as it has no body through which to perform mitzvos, to learn Torah, it can be elevated through our actions. And more than anything else, if there are lessons that we can learn from the person, we can apply those lessons to ourselves in a consistent and a continual manner. That itself is the greatest zechus for the neshama. And in this case, it would be a wonderful merit for Ariel. Last night I was thinking about him. I was thinking about his life. He never let his health interrupt his life. There are very few people who have done, who could have done, or would have done what he did. He kept up with his classes, as Ari Miller can attest to, kept up with his classes by listening to the Rebbeim Shiurim on tape. And when you think about that, in hindsight, it made him who he was. When you think about the fact that he was a fabulous Talmid Chacham, despite having spent the formative years of his learning, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, parts of Beis Medrash, in the hospital, getting treatment, missing classes, missing study time, missing chavrusa time, missing seder. It's mind-boggling, the level that he reached. I think it was his persistence, his tenacity, his commitment to getting through the moment that enabled him to grow and develop, despite his circumstances. And I think this should give us a general sense of Ariel. The concept, the idea that life didn't get in his way. He lived his life. He lived every moment. But I want to focus on two specific things. People, you ask someone, how you doing? You ever get the response, I can't complain? And I forgive me for saying this, but I hate that response. I strongly dislike, as we tell our children, instead of using the word hate. I don't understand it. I can't complain. You're looking to complain? People say, how are you doing? You hope the guy says, Baruch Hashem, I'm doing great. How are you doing? In other words, I haven't really answered your question. You ask Ariel, how are you doing? Anybody remember what he used to answer? He always answered the exact same thing. Baruch Hashem, a little better. No matter how ill he looked, no matter how pale he was, no matter what was going on, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? And he knew that we cared. His answer was always the same. Baruch Hashem, a little better. And I used to laugh. I used to laugh. I say, Ariel, you're not doing a little better. He'd say, no, Baruch Hashem, I'm feeling a little better. I was his roommate for 2 years in yeshiva. Never, not once did I ever hear him complain. Never heard him complain. And he could have very easily complained. But Baruch Hashem, a little better. That was his response. His positive speech is a marvel. Truly, truly inspiring. Personally, I struggle on occasion with a critical bent to my thoughts. But Ariel was my Rebbe in positivity, my Rebbe in positive speech. And I think that formulaic response that he used, Baruch Hashem, a little better, he meant it. And it expressed his bitachon so simply, so beautifully. The second element of Ariel that I thought is worth mentioning, and something from which we can learn, was that he would finish what he started. In my lifetime, I've probably begun and completed thousands of books. I don't know if I can tell you how many Sifrei Kodesh I have learned from the first page of the Sefer to the end of the Sefer. 5, 10, I don't know if I can tell you how many it is, but it's certainly not thousands. But I remember asking him, Ariel, a certain Sefer just came out, I think you'd find it interesting, it's just been published. Do you want me to get you a copy of it? He'd say, no thank you, I'm still in the middle of the one that I'm reading. Because he would take a Sefer, start at the beginning, and learn it all the way through to the end. And we're not talking about simple svarim, we're not talking about books of stories or of Musar, we're talking about very academic works. Official Mill wrote a Sefer on the Shiftei Yisrael describing the various 12 tribes of the Jewish people, and it's based on Midrashim and on the Zohar. It's a very dense book. And he read it from page 1 to page 327, or however many pages it is. He learned the entire Sefer, and he knew it. That was the way he used to do things. That consistency, that single-minded focus, that ability to start and to finish something, the sense of having a goal, the sense of spiritual growth, that journey that he successfully completed, that's something from which we can all learn. A journey that he did in a very positive way. Again, something from which we can all learn, and hopefully we too can propel ourselves on our journey in a positive way where we start and we go all the way to the end. And may that be a memory for his blessing. And may Ariel Chaim ben Reuven Yaakov, be a Milas Yosher for his family, his friends, and his entire community.
Thank you, Avi. And it's beautiful. A few years ago, David Horowitz and I met at Pico Kosher Deli for lunch to get to know each other. We have a lot in common, many interests in common. And after David ordered chicken soup with knedlich, I said to him, so tell me, how did you move from being, a liberal to conservative defender of Israel? And he said, fiercely, I was not a liberal, I was a communist. Which reminded me, I once saw a film, I Married a Communist, and I thought, oh, I'm having lunch with a communist. David was not just a communist, he was a red-diaper baby. And was one of the founders of what was called the New Left in America, which was started out like most things leftist with great intentions, and it ended up being what David called the destructive generation, perhaps one of the most destructive generations we've ever seen in America. David has devoted much of his attention over the past several years to what's happened to the American university, the radicalization of the American university, to the anti-Zionism, which is a mask for anti-Judaism in the American university. In 2003, he launched an academic freedom campaign to return to the American university traditional principles of open inquiry and to halt indoctrination in the classroom. To further these goals, he devised an academic Bill of Rights to protect students from abusive professors. In the same year, Horowitz founded Students for Academic Freedom, which now has chapters in 200 college campuses. He said that you can't get a good education if you're only telling half the story. It's my pleasure to introduce David Horowitz, my friend and my mentor.
I want to thank Karen and Robert for inviting me to give this lecture in memory of their son, Ariel. I too have lost a child and know that there is no reprieve from the pain that such a loss inscribes on the hearts of those who are left behind. Like Ariel, my daughter Sarah was also burdened with medical problems which eventually took her life. And she was also brave, like Ariel, in facing them. And she was also an inspiration to others. Like Ariel, Sarah was an observant Jew and a devoted student of Judaism. There is no set expectation of an afterlife in Judaism. But every morning over coffee, Sarah said the prayer from the Amidah, "Blessed are you, God, you resurrect the dead." The idea of the afterlife that made most sense to her was one she found in the Jewish mystical tradition. It was called Gilgul Hanefesh, a rolling of the souls. It is basically a reincarnation in the spirit, she said. We Jews are the oldest surviving people among the nations. We have outlived all the civilizations that conquered ours, the Babylonian, the Greek, the Roman, and the Egyptian, whose civilization was buried by Muslim Arabs. What kept us alive for 3,000 years? Without question, it was our Jewish faith. The ultimate heroes of the Jewish story are not its warriors, but its rabbis and scholars and educators who kept alive the faith and the tradition, its wisdom and its laws. It was Judaism that allowed us to resist our conquerors and survive their occupations, which buried all the others. Although he was taken from this life as a young man, Ariel Avrech was already one of these heroes. If Ariel had been allowed a full span, he would have been a rabbi or educator, but always a scholar and teacher of Judaism. This lecture series, which I am privileged to be part of, is Ariel's Rolling of the Souls. His parents are devoted to his memory and to keeping his spirit alive not only in their own hearts, but in every heart they are able to touch. Through their efforts, Ariel's spirit is here with us, inspiring us and arming us in the face of the mighty forces that want to see us disappear. And that is my subject today. A few weeks ago, I was invited to speak to a fundraiser for the Jewish National Fund, which was founded in 1915 and is the organization that bought all the land on which Israel today exists. And the topic they wanted me to speak on is why the world needs Israel. In a certain way, this makes a kind of sense. Jews are 0.02% of the world's population, but have been awarded 25%, fully 1/4 of all the Nobel Prizes in science and economics. Israel has made the highest per capita contribution to technological innovation, and it has the highest per capita contribution also to advancements in medical science. When there's a catastrophe in some country, as in Haiti, little Israel is among the first nations to go there with help. Israel is also a model for the nations, a tolerant democracy that has assimilated 1 million Muslim Arabs. It's the only place in the Middle East that is tolerant, and it's the only place where if you're gay, you can hold a gay pride parade. It is a shining beacon of democracy. It is a miracle among the nations. Yet, it would be foolish to think that the world thinks it needs Israel or the Jews. You just have to turn those statements I made around and ask, how many Nobel Prizes in science or economics has the Muslim Arab world been awarded? How many technological contributions have they made? How many advances in modern medicine? How many oil-rich Arab states went to the aid of the Haitians or anybody that isn't a Muslim? When you ask those questions, you understand how other people look at us. And you have to come to the very hard but necessary truth that we Jews are hated for our virtues. And since we will, from here to eternity, strive to be virtuous, that hatred is always going to follow us. Israel is a miracle among the nations, yet today, the global anti-Semitism is more virulent than it has been at any time in modern times, even in the 30s in Germany. Hitler hid the final solution, his plan to exterminate the Jews from the German people, because he thought not only the Germans, but the world was too civilized to find that an attractive proposition, despite the anti-Semitism that existed. Ahmadinejad shouts it from the rooftops, wipe the Jews from the face of the earth, and is applauded throughout the Muslim world, and is tolerated by the Europeans and the rest of the world. The Muslim Brotherhood is the fount of the modern anti-Semitism. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded by Hassan al-Banna, an admirer of Hitler. He translated Mein Kampf into Arabic in the 30s. He is the author of the statement. He made the statement when Israel was about to be born that the Arabs would push the Jews into the sea. Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who is an imam, he is the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, recently said on Al Jazeera TV that the Holocaust was a God's punishment to the Jews for their corruption, that it would happen again, and this is the quote, next time, Allah willing, at the hands of the believers. That's the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is now, thanks to many assists from the present government of the United States, the power in Egypt. First by calling for the removal of Mubarak, then for, actually our intelligence chief said that the Muslim Brotherhood was a secular organization and a moderate one. Our Secretary of State said they were willing to participate in the political process, and I could go on and on. And just last week, I think Kerry gave over $1 billion to the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is also the inspirer. It was where Osama bin Laden picked up his view of jihad. And it is the creator of Hamas. And in the Hamas charter, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, a hadith, is inscribed. And the saying, you're probably familiar with it, is, the day of redemption will only come when Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. When the Jews hide behind the rocks and the trees, and the rocks and trees cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." That saying of the Prophet Muhammad, who is the true fountainhead of Jew hatred in the Muslim religion, and it's just undeniable. Muhammad himself committed a genocide against the Quraysh tribe of Jews when he was alive. And the Holy Book speaks of us as apes and pigs. And of course, we are infidels, which it calls on its followers to slay us. And let me just say here, sure, there are, like in every religion, there are people who follow the rules, who wear them, and who don't. I think that's a little harder in Orthodox Judaism, but in most religions, that's the case. There are good Muslims and bad Muslims, but there were also good Germans and bad Germans, and in the end, the good Germans didn't make any difference at all. That saying that Muslims have to kill Jews for the day of judgment to come is on the University of Southern California website. Among the hadiths, they're called hadiths, the sayings of the Prophet. You have to understand that unlike Judaism and unlike Christianity, Islam has never been through any kind of reformation. It's never adjusted its beliefs. I was actually confronted by president of Hillel, which I'll get to in a bit, at the University of North Carolina, when I brought up this hadith, and he said, well, Joshua killed all the Amalekites. I said, yeah, there's a difference though. There are no Amalekites around anymore. And Jews haven't been massacring people for whatever, 2,000 years. Didn't make a difference with this young man. When I saw the hadith the saying was up on it's an official USC website. Since I've myself been carrying out campaigns on campuses, I conducted Islamofascism awareness weeks at 100 campuses every semester for about 4 semesters. And I'm a very hot button figure. I knew that I shouldn't make the call to the university to take down the hadith. So I called the Wiesenthal Center and spoke to the young Rabbi Heyer. And he found a trustee who talked to the then provost and now president of USC, Nikias. And Nikias actually made it's the strongest statement I've ever heard from a university figure about something like this. He said it was disgusting and they had to take it down. Whereupon he was attacked by all the Muslim Brotherhood's front organizations, the CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim, every major Islamic society in America, organization, all the ones that our government is working with are fronts for the Muslim Brotherhood, as is the organization that put this hadith up, which is the Muslim Students Association. It's a Muslim Brotherhood front. Nikias was attacked by CARE, by the Muslim American Society, and by the Muslim Students Association as persecuting a religion. Today, that saying is back up on the USC website, where it's put by a joint effort by the Muslim Student Union there and a Jewish organization. And since that's going to be the thrust, it was my experience on the campuses, that every effort I made to try to wake people up to the serious threat to the survival of Israel and to the lies on which the Palestinian case is based, among my chief opponents were student Hillels. You have to understand that, and as Robert pointed out, I come from the left. All these leftist ideologies, whether it's Marxism or whether it's liberalism, are substitutes for a religion, for a true religion, which any true religion teaches humility, teaches that if there is, well, just think about the first chapters of Genesis. We were given a paradise better than anything liberals or progressives or socialists propose. We didn't have to work, we didn't die in Eden, and we showed that we didn't deserve it, that we had the free will, and our free will led us to want to know evil, which is what the eating of the apple means. And when we were expelled from the Garden of Eden, Hashem put an angel with a flaming sword at the gates to prevent our return. So any religion that understands human nature and understands this also understands that there will only be a redemption by a divinity, that human beings, that we can maybe make holy a place around us, but we can't change the world. I just read an interesting article about Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is what all the liberals and all the Jewish federations use, as that's their mantra, which means repair the world. You can't do that. Somebody once said to me, somebody once remarked that Reform Judaism is like the Democratic Party with holidays. And that's what it is. It's a substitute religion. So that's what underlies the opposition. In the last 2 years, I conducted I did two things. Mainly I was addressing with my student groups the Israeli apartheid weeks that are held on campuses. These weeks are all sponsored by the Muslim Brotherhood, i.e. by the Muslim Students Association and Students for Justice in Palestine, which is out of Hamas, but that's also the Muslim Brotherhood. And I took out ads. I took out ads in college papers with they create walls and they inscribe on the walls all kinds of Jew-hating incitements. They put up maps that show Palestine as all green in 1947, i.e. as the Palestinian state, which didn't exist only in their imaginations. Actually, these maps are taken from Hamas. And then they show the infiltration of the Jews over the years and the incursions and encroachments. Well, if the Jews stole Arab land or Palestinian land, then they have they're on the moral bad side. And this is the basis for all the attacks on Israel. The fact of the matter is there's not an inch of Israel, or even the West Bank, which is as you know, the historic homeland of the Jews, that was Arab land, let alone Palestinian land. For 400 years prior to the agreements by the British and the French that created not only Israel, but Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. For the 400 years, all that land around the Jordan was controlled by the Ottoman Turks, who are not Arabs. The word Palestine is not it's not Arabic. It's Latin. It's the name that when the Romans conquered us, when some radical Jews called zealots, which is where we get it from, had the very bad idea to go up against the Roman Empire, and we were crushed. 1 million Jews were killed, and the Romans gave the name Palestine to this area, the Jewish homeland, Judea and Samaria, because it was the name of their enemies, the Philistines. It was a humiliation. In any case, I took out an ad in the Daily Pennsylvanian of the University of Pennsylvania. And it basically was this, I had created a wall of lies, which just to confront all the lies on the Israeli apartheid wall. Of course, Israel is the only country in the Middle East that's not an apartheid state. Just the only one. Anyway, I took out an ad, and I was immediately attacked by in a letter signed by Pen for Palestine, which is Hamas, it's the Students for Justice in Palestine, and leaders of UPenn, Hillel. And I was called a racist and an Islamophobe. I didn't call anybody names. I just printed the truth, which is that Israel was built on Turkish land. Actually, when you think about it, since the Turks had that land for 400 years before Israel was created, American Indians have a greater claim on the United States than the Arabs have on any part of Israel. I went to UPenn to meet with the Rabbi Alpert, who was the head of Philadelphia, the whole region, Philadelphia Regional Hillel. And Rabbi Alpert is a very intelligent man. He understands very well what's going on in the Middle East and the genocidal campaign against the Jews. But he is of the same mindset as the Jewish National Fund in that we have to emphasize the positive. And that's the way we will win this PR battle. Well, actually, we've been losing the political battle for 30 years doing this. And I know when I was a leftist, people always asked me, and when I left the left, how could you be so... how could you want to destroy America? How could you want to have a revolution? This is, look at this country compared to other countries. But we never did that. We compared it to this fantasy we had of a future which looked like the Garden of Eden. And if you create a perfect future in your mind and you compare it to anything that exists, whatever exists is going to look bad and worse because America was so powerful. America was defending all the bad people in the world, defending private property, individual liberty, and so forth. So once you lose the argument, the basic moral argument, once you don't say, and I took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, or it was a half-page ad, and they're big pages. The case, the Palestinian case against Israel is based on a genocidal lie. And that lie is that the Jews stole Palestinian land. Of course, there was nobody even claiming to be a Palestinian people until 1964, 16 years after the creation of the State of Israel, when the KGB and Nasser created the Palestinian Liberation Organization. If you read their charter, which is on the web, you will see that at the time, Jordan had annexed the West Bank, and Egypt had annexed Gaza. They didn't exist on the map. If you read, and also 70% of Jordan, as you probably know, is Palestinian, or they're Arabs from the Palestine Mandate. The term Palestine Mandate refers to a geographical region, not a people. These are all Arabs. They all have the same ethnicity. They all speak the same language. They all have the same religion and culture. And we are watching, actually, Arab states break up in this civil war between Sunnis and Shias that is ripping Syria apart, but also it's just Iraq and other states. Sorry, I kind of digressed a little there, but I did this ad in any case, and I was called racist and Islamophobe. And Rabbi Alpert, I sat down with him for an hour, and I met with Jewish students there. And his position was, we don't want to provoke the left. The campus left is very powerful. And the Muslim student, we don't want to provoke the Muslim Students Association. And actually, one of the Jewish leaders said his roommate was, president of the Muslim Students Association. I had this conversation many times. I said, well, have you asked him if he would support the right of the Jews to have a state on the land where Israel now exists in the Middle East? They won't do it. The student, when I asked the student at the University of North Carolina the same question, he said, he's my brother, and it would be insulting to ask him to do that. Now, how supine is that? How cowardly is that? I guarantee you, there's not a Muslim, president of a Muslim Students Association who wouldn't say, if you want to be my friend, you have to respect my people or my basic rights. And every Jew would say, of course. I then was asked to speak by Tritons for Israel. I've spoken on, I'm just giving you a few illustrative cases. I was asked to speak by Tritons for Israel at UC San Diego. And they raised money for my honorarium, and I might travel. And then I got a letter back and said Hillel was not going to allow them to do that. Now, Hillel is the bank for these student organizations. And I actually met with the acting Hillel director, and she said I was too controversial. I was controversial, and Hillel didn't get involved in controversial matters. Of course, all these Hillels are engaging in dialogue with the Muslim Students Association. They're not controversial because the left and they dominate the campuses. UC San Diego, what I saw at UC San Diego was an atrocity. I viewed the wall. It was like 12 feet high and I don't know how many, 30 feet or more long, right in the middle of the camp, so all the students had to walk by it. It had a kind of like a shrine, those kind of illustrations of dead martyrs that you see in a shrine for Sheikh Yassin, who was the head of Hamas and had murdered 394 Jews before the Israelis put an end to him. It had pictures of Jewish Israeli planes, warplanes, shooting at little children. I could go, and I had the map, and on with its lies. Angela Davis and Norman Finkelstein, the Holocaust denier, and Angela Davis is still a communist and a Jew hater. And other leftists all came, all paid for. I guarantee you that Angela Davis didn't appear for less than $10,000. Where did the money come from? It came from the university. $40,000 were allocated for this hate week against the Jews. The UC San Diego is composed of 6 or 7 colleges. The Thurgood Marshall College was one of the sponsors. The arts department was a sponsor of Israeli Apartheid Week. The universities all pretend they have, well, you will be punished if you, called for said that South Africa was built on land, stole the land from the Boers. If you did anything mildly offensive to black students on these campuses, they would just cut you off and shut you down. And they have on all their websites, respect for the other, diversity. We respect other members of it goes for everybody but Jews. And that tradition is continuing there. That is, they hold this Israeli Apartheid Week every year with university sponsorship. Now, I gave a speech in which I call this an outrage. I referred to it as Hitler Youth Week. And then came question and answer. I don't know if any of you have seen the video of me and this student. It's up on YouTube, and it's been seen by about 1.5 million people. But she was, wearing a scarf, Muslim garb, although she was obviously an American. And she was a member of the Muslim Students Association. And she challenged me, my contention that the MSA was a front for the Brotherhood. And rather than go through all of there is a factual basis for it. It's just undeniable, because there was a trial of something called the Holy Land Foundation. It was the largest Muslim charity in America. And it was just a funding operation for Hamas. And there was a trial in Texas. And at the trial, a document, one of the documents the FBI got by raiding their offices, and they were convicted, was a plan to infiltrate American society and its institutions and subvert it from within, and in their words, destroy the Western civilization. And then it listed their network, and the Muslim Students Association was part of it. But I didn't want to go into this explanation with her. I wanted to cut to the chase. So, because I had had this experience at Columbia, at UC Santa Barbara, where Muslim Students Association people would get up, and I would say to them, will you condemn Hamas as a genocidal organization? Knowing that they wouldn't, because Hamas is also a Muslim Brotherhood front. And the first thing she said took me aback. She said, you want to crucify me? Interesting image. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, if I don't denounce Hamas, the government will conclude that I support Hamas, and I will be investigated by Homeland Security. Would that were so. So I just ignored what she had said there, and I said, look, I'll put it to you this way. And I said, I'm a Jew, and the head of Hezbollah has said he wishes that we would all gather in Israel so he wouldn't have to hunt us down globally, for it or against it. She leaned in the microphone and said, "For it." Perfectly articulate university student. And immediately, of course, when that went up on the web, the leftists at the school and the Muslim Students Association all defended her. You have to understand how deep this is. I mean, it's not as though you go up to a leftist and say, "Are you a Jew hater?" Then, well, of course not. Are you anti-American? Oh, of course not. Well, they're pro-American in the sense that somewhere in the future there's going to be this fantasy world created, which America will be the perfect state, social justice state. That's where they're patriots. But the America now, we're bad. And it's the same thing for the Jews and Israel. There is no distinction that can be made between Jew hatred and Israel hatred, or anti-Israelism or anti-Zionism and anti-Judaism. Not when you see the entire Arab Muslim world setting out to kill the Jews. I was just looking this morning at Palestine Media Watch, which is a website that just takes videos from the PLO and Gaza. And the PLO is, it's got instructional videos for, I don't know, the kids look 6-year-olds, and little girls carrying AK-47s to kill the Jews. So when that situation exists and people attack Israel, which is wholly the victim of an Arab, a 60-year, more than that now, 60-year Arab, unprovoked Arab war. The Jews were given 3 slivers of land that belonged to the Turks, and the Arabs, the Arab world declared war on them, and that war has never stopped. In that context, you can't be anti-Zionist. I mean, these people, there's no national liberation movement, which is what Zionism was, that the left is critical of. Also, Pat Buchanan, there's none that they're critical of except Zionism. And Pat Buchanan is critical of all, so he's consistent. He's critical of all of them, including Zionism. So that was a really bad experience at UC San Diego. And it is my common experience. I can't tell you. I've had this experience all over the country. And I made an attempt after speaking with Rabbi Alpert to reach out to the Hillel directors, because previously I had just put these ads in the papers. And let me tell you, I've been banned from taking ads out at the University of Pennsylvania and at 100 universities across the country. And if you read my ads, you see they're just factual ads, but they're blunt. It's a lie to say that the Jews stole the land. The Palestinian leadership, they lie about everything. They've even gone so far as to say there have never been Jews in the land of Israel. It's unbelievable. The Temple of Solomon isn't Jewish, if you follow this. But that's what, I said they're liars. Or these are lies. I didn't even call them liars. So I decided, and actually I was working with a Hillel director. I just want to show you that I'm not interested in confrontation for its own sake. It's only it's only a means to take the discussion out of the surreal world. We talk about a peace process. How crazy is that? How can you make peace with people who want to kill you? You can't. Let the Palestinians stop the rhetoric, let them stop teaching the kids, let them stop the violence. Then you can talk peace. You can't talk peace now. There is no peace process with Nazis. And that's what these are. I mean, I use the term Islamofascism, but Islamo-Nazism is much more accurate. considering that Jew hatred is the center of this jihadist crusade. Anyway, I decided that I would reach out to I was working with a director of Hillel who kept urging me to be more, to inform the Hillels before I did anything and so forth. He now has resigned from the Hillel board. So I don't have any allies there, but I approached the Hillel director at University of North Carolina, Ariel, and I said to him, this is an ad I'm planning to put in your paper. What do you think? My ad was this. It was, where are they now? And it had 12 leaders of the Muslim Students Association. There were presidents of Muslim student organizations at American campuses, American universities, who had gone on to high-level positions in Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. And the reason is that the MSA, it poses as a religious cultural organization, but it's really a recruitment organization. I know this from my own past. I grew up in a communist household. I belonged to Young Progressives of America. We had all these peace organizations. And they were all front groups. And the Communist Party would select the politically recruitable people to come into the party. That's the way it works. So, of course, a president of a Muslim Students Association is a prime subject for recruitment into a serious jihadist organization. The most famous of these is Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed in a drone strike after encouraging the Fort Hood jihadist Major Hassan to massacre our soldiers at Fort Hood, and I think the Christmas bomber who was thwarted. Anwar al-Awlaki was the leader of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and he was also a former president of the Muslim Students Association at Colorado State University. I tried to place this ad in the Colorado State paper. They rejected it. Very, very, very bad situation on our campuses. Anyway, so I submitted this to Harry Gauss, and he said to me, well, he said, if it's true, it's sort of serious, but I'm not convinced that the Muslim Students Association at University of North Carolina is part of the national MSA. Well, if there's an organization sponsoring hatred of blacks like the Ku Klux Klan, and you don't agree with their agendas, you don't form an organization locally called the KKK, Chapel Hill KKK. Also, if they're using the same name, you'd think that this big organization would sue them for infringement of their, copyright. And also, there happens to be a website for the Muslim Students Association, and you go up there and it shows all its affiliates. And one of its affiliates is the MSA at the University of North Carolina. But in my ecumenical mode, or work with Hillel mode, I didn't bring that up to Ari Gauss. And instead, I sent him a pamphlet. Instead, I said, would you distribute, my organization publishes a lot of pamphlets, and this one is called Muslim Hate Groups on Campus. And it is a history of the MSA and Students for Justice in Palestine. And he said he would. So I came to campus and I asked him to get some Hillel students to meet with me. I had wanted to address a whole group, but 2 came. And I got reports from my staff that they were saying that there was a lot of resistance because they were leftists. You have to understand, when it's a substitute religion, that's what the left is. The world has fallen, and we're going to redeem it. Not a divinity, but us. This is why they're so dangerous. When When you realize that, you can understand why there are all these leftists who've infiltrated the Hillels and now dominate them. So I met with these two students, and one of them was named Josh. He was the president of the MSA, of Hillel, student Hillel, and he was the one who brought up the Amalekites. He also said that, I still can't believe this, rabbis decapitate people who don't observe the Sabbath. I said, what? When was the last time a rabbi decapitated anyone, let alone, but you can't do, this is all, they get this garbage, fed to them by the Muslims probably, but whatever. And it ended badly, the event, but I gave them the pamphlets, I asked them to come, and I gave my speech. Now I was invited by, it's called Citizens for a Better Carolina and College Republicans. And these kids, these were all Christian kids. And the reason when I was invited, I said, why, and they wanted me to speak, I get invited by college Republicans, why do you want me to speak on the Middle East? And this is what he said to me. He said, there's nobody standing up for Israel on this campus. Anyway, I gave my speech. 40 members of the Muslim Students Association came and walked out in a demonstration, which I'm used to. The next day, the school paper had a report on what I said. Well, it didn't really report it. It said one thing about what I actually said, which is a statement about good Muslims and bad Muslims, which was good because they were calling me a racist again and a bigot and so forth. 3 op-ed columns attacking me for being a racist and Islamophobe and inflaming the campus and all kinds of nonsense. One by the head of Students for Justice in Palestine, one by the head of the Muslim Students Association, and one by Josh, the head of Hillel. This is the greatest damage to the Jews on campus is being done by Jews. Well, I shouldn't say the greatest, the second greatest, because they have credibility. When I'm attacked by Jews on a campus for saying simple truths, that has credibility. I'm going to conclude. I could go on, but it would just depress you more. Remember the 3 sayings of Hillel. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? When you think about it, the third is not really an ethical prescription. It's a timing. You're gonna be virtuous. You're gonna be wise. Best time to start is now. The second statement, if I am only for myself, who am I? That's a statement that is picked up by all the liberal, progressive, leftist appeasers of the enemies of the Jews. But to think about that statement, if I am only for myself, what am I? Well, you can be for yourself and your family. You can be for yourself and your community. You can be for yourself and your people. You can be for yourself. And in America, Jews should be for America because this is the most protected place for Jews right now on the planet. The injunction is not to love your enemies. There was a Jew who had that for saying, created a whole new religion. But for Jews, that's a kind of heresy. Jews have to stand up for themselves. We need Jews who stand up for us. Ariel Avrech was a stand-up Jew. His presence is missed, but his spirit lives on to inspire us. Baruch Hashem.
take questions and answers.
These UCLA, campus Hillel groups that come down on the side of the mosques and all that. Why don't, and I presume they're doing that because they're scared of being killed by one.
No, they're intimidated because they don't want to be called racist. They don't want to, look, in this country, I'm just trying to remember the statistic, but 3/4 of the hate religions are against Jews, and only 8% are against Muslims. But the Muslims are the ones that are protected. They're covering up all the time Muslim atrocities.
But I think they're scared of terrorism.
I think that's an element for people. It was, intimidation works, but it's the name calling. I think that's the most serious.
Well, why don't you stay neutral? Just say that's not our organization.
Well, you have to understand how the Muslim Students Association operates as a cultural religious organization, but it also sponsors the Israeli apartheid weeks. And it sponsors speakers that are Jew haters, gay haters. It's just quite remarkable. And it's remarkable how much denial. I think it's denial. Jews are, we're numerically very small. Our enemies are very numerous. So they prefer that there be no trouble. Oh, I used to start my talks with a joke, which was, there are two Jews before a firing squad. And the captain of the firing squad says, would either of you gentlemen have a final request, as they're loading up their rifles or aiming them. And one Jew says to the other, I think I'd like a blindfold. And the other Jew says, let's not make trouble. It's very human to be in denial against, such, it's horrible to contemplate. But I think that's, when I was 15, I did a paper on the Warsaw Ghetto. There were 500,000 Jews herded into the ghetto. People escaped from Auschwitz and other camps and came and warned them that you're going to be shipped off to the death camps. And didn't believe them. The Hillels of the time, the Jewish councils, organized the ghettos, got everybody's name. So when the Germans came for them, they knew where everybody was, and the Jewish councils helped them put them on the trains. When the ghetto finally, there was a revolt at the end, when there were 1,500 Jews left, they held off the Germans for 6 weeks, which is more than France. If the Jews had resisted, if they had armed themselves and resisted, there would be a lot more Jews alive today. That's the reality, but people they're in denial, and we're seeing it repeated. It's the same syndrome. Yeah.
I understand the fact, as you mentioned, the liberal and the left and intimidation and so on. You didn't mention, I'm not sure this is the case, how much is their money in terms of influencing programs on the campus?
Huge. They gave $20 million, like Georgetown has this total apologist for the terrorists. I've gotten to that age where my head is like Swiss cheese when it comes to names. Esposito, yeah. They gave him $20 million. They spread it all around. What they do is, I know a gentleman who gave $3 million to the Middle East Studies program at UC Berkeley. And when he told me that, I said, when he told me that he had given $3 million, I said, listen, this is a program controlled by the Saudis. They got your money to help set it up, and then actually their money is in there setting it up, and then they get, the government has these Title VI grants, I think they are, to underwrite, because they need language people. So then our government subsidizes the Saudi department. So he had only given $1 million of the $3 million. He said, I want to give you I want the second $1 million to go to a professor of Jewish studies. Middle East studies, Jewish studies. So they hired a professor from Tel Aviv University who had been fired for plagiarism, and who was a raving anti-Israel radical. So he didn't give him the last $1 million. Just terrible. And you know, if you say things, you know, like they marginalize you. That's what happens to you. You're always referred to as a, you know, xenophobe, an Islamophobe. That's the big term.
When you say your ads were rejected by the University of North Carolina, isn't there a First Amendment issue here?
No. The university, I've had so much experience with this. There ought to be with any public institution. But sometime in the 70s, the universities they didn't want to deal with these problems. So they allowed these papers to become independent of the university. Of course, they can't exist without the university distributing them and so forth. So I've just had this problem all over and consulted lawyers, and it's just hopeless.
Thank you very much. David, you can ask David more questions afterwards when we retire to the social hall. Rabbi Muskin is going to lead us in Kapitel Tehillim. Then I'll say the Kaddish D'Rabbanan, and then you're all invited for lunch.
נפשי ישלבב ינחני ומאג לצדק למען שמו, גם כי ילך בגיא צלמובס, לא ירא כי אתה עמדי. שבתך משענתך המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שלך נגד צוררוי דשנתו ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Gadal v'yizgadash shmei Rabba. Amen. Barakute, kamnif machute. Chayechon of Yomechon of Chay, the Chol Beit Yisrael, Bagalav Zman Kariv, Imru, Amen.
Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba
Shmei Rabba Mavarach, Le'olam Omei, Omaya, Yibarach, Yishabach, Yitbar, Yitram, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitalev, Yitalashmed, Kudshabrichu. Elam Kol Birchatav Shirata, Tishbachatav Nachmata, Damiran Be'amav, Imru, Amen. Heishal Merab Min Shmai, V'chaim Aleinu V'Al Yisrael, Imru, Amen. Ose Shalom Ramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Yisrael, Imru, Amen.